Welcome to Scary Squid, the place for all things horror stories. If you enjoy any of our content, then please, I implore you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so we can keep making more of the same. Thanks guys, and enjoy the video.
I built my new life on a lie, and I'm terrified it's going to collapse. I'm writing this on a throwaway for obvious reasons that will become clear. I don't know if this is a confession or a preemptive apology to strangers. Maybe I just need someone to know the truth in case it all comes apart. I live in the UK now. I have a good job in IT support. I complain about the weather. I make Sunday roasts that are slightly too salty. I argue with my fiancée about baby names. She's 6 months pregnant. We're getting married in 4 months. Everyone keeps asking the same question lately. Are your family flying in from Syria for the wedding? I smile and say it's complicated. The official story, the one my colleagues, my neighbors, even my future in-laws believe, is that I worked as a translator for the Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders back in Syria. That when things got too dangerous, they helped me secure a visa and relocate to the UK. That I was one of the lucky ones. It's a good story. It's believable. It even explains why I don't talk about the past much. People fill in the blanks with heroism and trauma and assume I'm modest. It's a lie. The truth is that when I was 19, angry and stupid and full of certainty about things I didn't understand, I joined the group the world calls Islamic State. Even typing that makes my chest feel tight. I didn't join because I was some cartoon villain who wanted blood. I joined because I was lost, because the war had shattered everything that felt stable, because recruiters came to our town with speeches about dignity and brotherhood and justice, because they said we would build a pure society, free of corruption, free of hypocrisy. They spoke about honor, about defending our people, about purpose. When you're 19 and everything around you is rubble, literal rubble, purpose sounds holy. The first weeks felt almost structured. There were lessons, lectures, rules, clear lines between right and wrong. I thought I had found something solid in a collapsing world. Then came the reality. You don't see it all at once. It comes in layers. A man dragged into a courtyard, accused of collaborating. A public punishment. A child crying. You tell yourself it's necessary. You tell yourself war is ugly. You tell yourself the leaders know better than you. And then one day you're the one holding the gun. I won't describe what I did. I can't. I don't deserve to soften it by turning it into a story with dramatic details. Just know that I followed orders. I stood guard at checkpoints that sent people to their deaths. I helped enforce rules that crushed lives. I was complicit. Even if I didn't design the machine, I helped it run. The first time I felt physically sick wasn't after violence. It was after a meeting. One of the senior leaders had been preaching that we must reject all worldly corruption, that even taking a cigarette from someone as a bribe was a sin. He thundered about purity, about how we were different from every regime before us. That same night, I saw him accept a thick envelope from a local businessman. The next morning, that businessman's son, who had been accused of something that would have meant execution for anyone else, was quietly released. No speech, no explanation, just gone. That was the first crack. Then there were more. Leaders living in seized homes while fighters shared overcrowded rooms. Special food shipments that never reached the rank and file. Rules that applied to us, but not to them. They preached divine law and practiced convenience. The worst part wasn't even the hypocrisy. It was how quickly I'd learned to ignore suffering when it fit the narrative. I realized I had become the kind of person who could rationalize anything. One night, I was assigned to escort a group of detainees to another town. One of them was an old teacher I vaguely recognized from before the war. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw recognition in his eyes. He didn't plead. He didn't shout. He just said my name. Not the name they'd given me in the group. My real name. In that moment, I felt split in two. The version of me who used to sit in classrooms and complain about homework, and the version holding a rifle, pretending righteousness. I don't know what happened to him after we handed them over. I tell myself maybe he was released. I know that's unlikely. That night I threw up behind the barracks and couldn't stop shaking. Leaving wasn't heroic. It wasn't some dramatic rebellion. It was slow and quiet and cowardly. I volunteered for less visible duties. I claimed illness. I distanced myself from the most violent units. I started talking, cautiously, to a cousin who had stayed out of everything and was looking for a way to get out of the country entirely. By then, the so-called state was fracturing under pressure from every side. Supplies were thinner, paranoia thicker. The hypocrisy became impossible to ignore. Leaders arguing over spoils. Men who quoted scripture all day, whispering about money at night. The ideology that once felt solid now felt like a cheap stage set. Push hard enough, and you'd see the wood beams behind it. The final straw wasn't violence. It was a bribe, again. A wealthy family paid for safe passage out. Poor families begged and were told to trust in God. I realized then that there was no purity, no divine justice, just power. I left under the chaos of shifting front lines. I won't explain how. Some of it still makes me nervous to write. But I made it out of the territory. I shaved my beard. I stopped using the name they'd given me. I let parts of that life fall away like diseased skin. Through connections, not humanitarian ones, despite what I say now, I eventually made it to Turkey, then through an asylum process that was built on a story of fear and coercion, which wasn't entirely untrue. I was afraid, but I was not just a victim. By the time I arrived in the UK, I had rehearsed my new biography so many times, it felt real. I was a translator. I helped international doctors communicate with locals. I saw too much violence and needed to leave. None of those sentences are entirely false. I did translate occasionally. I did see violence. I did need to leave. But I wasn't the good guy in that story. I met my fiancée 3 years ago at a friend's barbecue. She laughed at my joke about British trains. She asked about my accent. I gave her the same rehearsed story. She squeezed my hand when I mentioned the war. She thinks I'm strong for surviving it. She thinks I'm compassionate because of what I witnessed. If she knew what I was, would she look at me the same way? The strange thing is, I'm not religious anymore. Not even a little. Not in the way I was raised. Not in the way the group twisted it. If anything, my faith died in that courtyard, with the bribes and the speeches and the bodies. When our baby kicks, I don't pray. I just sit there in awe, terrified and grateful. I have done everything I can to build something decent. I work hard. I volunteer at a community tech workshop. I donate to charities, anonymously. I try, in small ways, to add more good than harm to the world. But how do you measure that? What's the conversion rate between cruelty and kindness? Some nights I dream that someone from back then is standing at our wedding reception, that they raise a glass and say my old name, that they describe me in detail, the checkpoints, the patrols, the uniforms. I see my future father-in-law's face fall. I see my fiancée's hand slip from mine. There are investigations sometimes in the news. Stories about former fighters discovered living quiet lives in Europe. I read them obsessively. I look for patterns. How were they found? What mistake did they make? I tell myself I'm not that person anymore. That the 19-year-old who believed in black and white answers died in the ruins of a city that doesn't even look the same now. But the law doesn't care about inner transformation, nor should it, maybe. I've considered telling her, so many times. I imagine sitting her down and explaining everything, watching her process it, giving her the chance to walk away before we're legally bound, before the baby arrives. Then I imagine the police at the door, deportation, prison, my child growing up with headlines instead of a father. Is my silence selfish? Absolutely. Is my confession now, to strangers, any less selfish? Probably. Sometimes I wonder whether redemption is even real, or if it's just something we invented so we can survive ourselves. If you met me today, you wouldn't see a monster. You'd see a slightly anxious man who overthinks baby stroller brands and burns the toast occasionally. You'd see someone who loves fiercely. But monsters aren't born with horns. They're built, piece by piece, through choices. I made those choices. I can't undo them. All I can do is wake up tomorrow and choose differently. I don't know what will happen. Maybe my past will stay buried. Maybe someone somewhere has already connected dots I can't see. Maybe one day my child will Google my name and find something I missed. If that day comes, I hope they'll at least know this. I was wrong. I was weak. I believed lies because they made me feel important. And when I finally saw the truth, I ran. Not bravely, not nobly, but because I couldn't stomach who I'd become. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve the life I have now. But when my fiancée rests her head on my chest and talks about paint colors for the nursery, I feel something I never felt back then. Not certainty, not righteousness, just fragile human love, and I am terrified of losing it.
I've been married 8 months, and I'm happier than I've ever been. My ex from my criminal past is threatening to expose me or kill my husband. I don't know what to do.
Throw away for obvious reasons. I'm shaking while I write this, so I'm sorry if this is all over the place. I've been married for 8 months. 8 months of the most normal, boring, beautiful life I could have imagined. We have a little semi-detached house with creaky stairs. We argue about whose turn it is to take the bins out. We fall asleep halfway through a Netflix. I wake up every morning next to someone who loves me in a way I didn't think I deserved. My husband has no idea who I used to be. No one in my current life does. Before I met him, before this city, before I changed my name and dyed my hair and built a new career from scratch, I was married once before. I don't talk about it. There are no photos online, no mutual friends. I disappeared from that life as cleanly as I could. My ex and I didn't just have a toxic relationship. We were criminals. This is the part where you're going to hate me. I don't blame you. We used to con and rob men. It started small. Dating apps, flirting, suggestive messages. I was good at it. I knew exactly how to make someone feel chosen. I'd arrange to meet at their house or a hotel. Sometimes I'd hint at things escalating, sometimes I'd promise outright. Then, at the right moment, usually when they were vulnerable, distracted, or half undressed, my ex would barge in. He'd pretend to be my furious boyfriend or husband. Sometimes he'd shout about betrayal. Sometimes he'd just start hitting. He was big, intimidating. Most of the men froze. A few tried to fight back. Those were the worst nights. We'd take wallets, watches, cash, phones, anything valuable. My ex would force them to unlock banking apps at times. I told myself these were sleazy men cheating on partners, or creeps who deserved it. That was the lie I fed myself so I could sleep. The truth? Not all of them were. Some were just lonely. Some were stupid. Some were arrogant. None of them deserved what we did. And yes, sometimes I had to go further than flirting. Sometimes to make it convincing, I had to actually sleep with them. Sometimes I agreed because it made the payout bigger. Sometimes because my ex insisted it would make the setup cleaner. I told myself I was in control. I wasn't. There were nights my ex went too far. He didn't just shove or threaten, he'd beat them long after they'd stopped resisting. I'd scream at him to stop. Sometimes he listened, sometimes he didn't. One night, a man was bleeding badly from his head. I remember staring at the carpet, thinking, this is it. This is the night someone dies. He didn't, as far as I know. We left before we could find out. I stayed anyway. Why? Because I was 22, broke, and already in too deep. Because by then I was complicit. Because he'd remind me that if I ever left, I'd go down with him. Because part of me liked the money, the adrenaline, the feeling of being wanted and powerful in those first few minutes before it all turned ugly. We did this for almost 3 years. 3 years of lies, bruises, hotel rooms, burner phones, and envelopes of cash. The marriage part? It was a sham even then. We were more like business partners who shared a bed. There was no love, just intensity and paranoia. We fought constantly. He drank more over time, got more volatile. The assaults got worse. The last job we ever did ended badly. The guy fought back harder than expected. My ex lost his temper completely. I remember shouting that we needed to leave. He didn't. I saw something in his face that terrified me. Not anger, but enjoyment. That was the moment I knew if I stayed, someone would die. Maybe a victim. Maybe me. I started siphoning small amounts of money from what we stole, hiding it. I made a plan quietly for months. When I finally left, I did it while he was away for a weekend. I took what I'd hidden, changed my number, left the city. I never filed for a divorce properly. I just disappeared. Eventually, I sorted it legally through a solicitor under a new address. He tried to contact me at first. Dozens of messages from new numbers, threats, begging, promises he'd changed. I ignored everything. Eventually, it stopped. For 3 years, I built something new. I got a legitimate job, rented a tiny flat, made friends who knew nothing about who I'd been. I went to therapy for a while, though I never told the full truth there either. I just said I'd been in an abusive relationship. Then I met my husband. He's kind in a way that makes my chest hurt. He's steady, calm, the sort of man who apologizes if he accidentally bumps into a table. The first time he raised his voice, just slightly, during a debate about politics, I flinched. He noticed. He asked questions gently. I told him I had some bad experiences in the past. He never pushed. We dated for 2 years before getting married. I told myself my old life was dead, buried, irrelevant. I wasn't that woman anymore. And I'm not. I haven't broken the law since I left. I don't even speed. I donate to charities. I volunteer. I try to be good in ways that probably look excessive from the outside. I thought I'd outrun it. 3 weeks ago, I got an email. It was from a new address, but I knew immediately. The writing style. The tone. He said he'd found me. He congratulated me on the wedding. Attached a photo of my husband walking into our house, taken from across the street. I threw up. Since then, he sent more messages. He says he's in financial trouble, that he needs £30,000, that it's only fair since I owe him for abandoning the partnership. If I don't pay, he'll either tell my husband everything, go to the police, or handle it personally, which he clarified means killing my husband and making me watch. He included our address in the last message, just to prove he could. I haven't told my husband. Every time I try, I imagine the look on his face. Not just horror, but betrayal, disgust, the realization that the woman he married orchestrated assaults, that I lured men into rooms knowing what would happen. Even if he believed I've changed, could he ever look at me the same way? And if I go to the police, I risk exposing myself too. There's no statute of limitations on some of what we did. I could lose everything. My job, my freedom, my marriage. But if I pay him, what stops him from asking for more next month? Or the month after? I haven't slept properly in days. Every car that slows outside makes my heart race. I check the locks 3 times before bed. My husband thinks I'm stressed about work. Part of me thinks I deserve this, that this is just consequences finally catching up. But my husband doesn't deserve it. He has no idea what he's tied himself to. I keep replaying old memories and seeing them differently now. The men's faces, the fear, the blood. I told myself for years that I was less guilty because I didn't throw the punches. But I opened the door, I set the trap. I made promises I knew would end in violence. That's on me. So here's why I'm posting. I need advice. Real advice. Not just, you're a monster, though I get it if that's what you think. Do I? Tell my husband everything and risk losing him, but at least give him the choice? Go straight to the police and accept that I might be arrested too? Try to pay my ex and hope he disappears again? Or something else I'm not seeing because I'm panicking? I love my husband more than anything. If anything happened to him because of my past, I would never survive it. I thought I'd changed. I still think I have. But maybe change doesn't erase what you did. Maybe it just makes you more aware of it. If you've read this far, thank you. I know I don't deserve kindness, but I need clarity. What would you do if you were me?
I rug pulled my own crypto project in my early 20s, made more money than my parents have ever had, and I'm not sure if I'm a villain or just good at capitalism.
Throwaway for obvious reasons. I'm in my early 20s. A year ago, I was broke. Not can't buy Starbucks broke. I mean checking my bank app before buying groceries broke.
Now I have more money sitting in a hardware wallet than my parents made combined in a decade. And I got it by creating a crypto token, hyping it, and rug pulling it.
I need to say this up front. Technically, I didn't break the law. I didn't hack anyone. I didn't steal passwords. I didn't break into accounts. I created a token. People voluntarily bought it. And I sold my allocation when liquidity was high. The smart contract didn't promise anything enforceable. There was no signed agreement.
It was just a token. And yet, people lost everything. Let me explain how it happened. I've been deep in crypto Twitter and Discord since I was 18. I watched meme coins explode. I watched total nonsense projects hit 8-figure market caps because of a good logo and a funny name. I saw influencers shill garbage and pretend it was community-driven. The more I watched, the more I realized something uncomfortable. This wasn't about technology. It wasn't about decentralization. It was about attention. If you could generate hype, you could generate liquidity. So I did. I designed a coin around a stupid but catchy concept, something memeable. I paid a guy on Fiverr to make a clean logo. I wrote a white paper that sounded impressive but said basically nothing. Buzzwords. Community governance. Long-term roadmap. Ecosystem expansion. There was no ecosystem. It was just a token on a popular chain. I seeded initial liquidity with about $8,000 I had saved from freelance coding. I made a Telegram group. I created a Twitter account. I DM'd small crypto influencers and offered them a percentage of tokens to tweet about it. Within 48 hours of launch, it started moving. Watching that chart was surreal. Every green candle felt like validation. People were posting rocket emojis. We're early. Next 100 times. Diamond hands. I was the dev. Anonymous, of course. I played the role perfectly. I talked about long-term vision. I hinted at major partnerships. I said things like, we're in talks and big announcements coming.
There were no talks, no partnerships.
But in crypto, hope is fuel. Within 2 weeks, the market cap had crossed 7 figures. My initial $8,000 liquidity
was now dwarfed by hundreds of thousands from buyers. I had allocated myself a large percentage of tokens at launch. That's standard. Everyone does it, and I knew what that meant. If I sold carefully, I could walk away with life-changing money. The first time I clicked swap, my heart was pounding. I told myself I was just taking some profit. Founders deserve compensation, right? The price dipped slightly. People in the chat said, "Healthy correction." I almost laughed. I kept selling in chunks, not enough to crash it instantly, just enough to extract liquidity steadily. Eventually, the floor gave out. The chart went vertical, in the wrong direction. Panic in the telegram. "Dev, what's happening? Is this a whale? Why is liquidity dropping?" I typed something vague about market volatility. Then I pulled the rest. Liquidity drained. Price nuked. Within minutes, it was effectively worthless. I deleted the telegram, locked the Twitter, disappeared. In total, after fees and everything, I walked away with just under $1.4 million. I remember sitting in my apartment staring at the number. It didn't feel real. I refreshed the wallet over and over. I transferred some to stablecoins. I moved some to a cold wallet. I expected to feel like a criminal. Instead, I felt powerful. That's the part that scares me. Over the next few days, I lurked anonymously in forums. I saw people posting screenshots. "I put in $12,000, it's gone." This was my savings. How could the dev do this? One guy said he convinced his brother to invest, and now couldn't look him in the eye. I read those comments while sitting in a brand new apartment I paid for in cash, and I didn't feel shame the way I thought I would. I felt uncomfortable, a tightness in my chest, but not enough to undo it. Not enough to send the money back. Not enough to publicly admit it. I told myself the same things everyone else says. No one forced them to buy. It's crypto. Everyone knows the risks. High risk, high reward. They were greedy too. And here's the thing that keeps echoing in my head. Powerful people do this kind of thing all the time. They launch products tied to hype, benefit massively, and retail investors are left holding the bag. Even public figures have launched coins that spiked and crashed. No one goes to prison. It's framed as business, marketing, timing. If they can do it, why am I uniquely evil? That's the mental gymnastics I've been doing for months. I paid off my parents' mortgage anonymously through a trust. I upgraded my life quietly. I invest conservatively now. Index funds, boring stuff. The irony. From the outside, I'm just a young guy who did well in crypto. Only I know how. Here's the real confession. I'm thinking about doing it again. Not with the same branding, not obviously connected. I've learned a lot since then. I could structure it better, spread wallets, use better narrative cycles, maybe even stretch it longer so it looks more organic before exit. That thought should horrify me. Instead, it feels like an opportunity. I've seen how the game works. Attention spikes, liquidity floods in, early insiders win, late buyers lose. That's the cycle. Every day, new tokens launch and implode. Some call it scams, others call it speculation. Where's the line? If I open a casino and someone loses their paycheck at blackjack, am I morally responsible? If I create a volatile asset and people ape in hoping for 100 times, am I obligated to protect them from their own risk tolerance? Or is that just capitalism? That's the question I can't answer, because here's the part I don't like admitting. I did mislead them. I implied there was long-term development. I hinted at things that didn't exist. I curated hope It wasn't a neutral slot machine. It was theater. And I was directing it. Some nights I replay specific messages. There was a guy who said he'd been rugged before and finally felt like he found a real community. I remember responding with a heart emoji and, "We're building something special." That was a lie. Does the fact that it wasn't legally binding make it morally fine? I keep trying to reduce it to systems. The market rewards risk. Information asymmetry is everywhere. Early adopters always have an edge. But deep down, I know this wasn't just asymmetric information. It was intentional extraction. And yet, the world doesn't seem to punish this behavior. It often rewards it. The loudest, most shameless players make the most money. They rebrand. They launch again. They build followings. Part of me feels stupid for even hesitating. Another part of me wonders if this is the fork in the road moment. If I do it again, it won't be an experiment. It'll be a choice. A declaration of who I am. What messes with my head is that I don't feel like a monster. I'm not cruel in daily life. I'm decent to people. I help friends move. I call my mom. I donate occasionally. But I also orchestrated something that wiped out strangers' savings. The cognitive dissonance is wild. I've tried to imagine one of the people who lost money sitting in front of me. If they asked, "Why did you do it?" what would I say? I saw an opportunity. I needed to get ahead. I didn't technically break the law. None of those sound good out loud, and still, when I look at my bank balance, it's hard to regret it. That's the ugliest truth in this whole post. The money changed my life. It gave me options, security, freedom from the anxiety I grew up watching my parents carry every day. If I could go back and undo it, knowing I'd return to being broke, I honestly don't know if I would. That's why I'm here. I need outside perspective that isn't just crypto bros yelling based or legend. Is what I did fundamentally wrong? Or is it just an extreme version of what markets already are? Risk transferred from the late to the early. If I do it again, does that cement me as a scammer? Or am I just playing a game that everyone willingly steps into? Some of you will say, if you have to ask, you know the answer. Maybe. But I also know that morality often lags behind innovation. Entire industries operate in gray zones until regulation catches up. By the time society labels something wrong, the early players are already rich and untouchable. Am I overthinking this? Is the guilt just social conditioning? Or is it the last warning sign before I become someone I can't respect? I haven't launched anything new. Not yet. I've sketched ideas, watched trends. I know exactly what narrative would hit right now. It would probably work. And that's the problem. Because the only thing stopping me isn't fear of jail. It's a quiet voice asking whether I want to build my future on people who trusted a story I knew wasn't real. So Reddit, be honest with me. Is this just capitalism and good business? Or am I dressing up exploitation in market language so I can sleep at night? I already know I can make the money. I just don't know what it will make me. I got away with murder, and now I'm haunted. Throwaway. I can't have this tied to my real account.
I don't really know how to write this. I'm not a writer. I'm not trying to make this dramatic. I just need to say it somewhere because I've been carrying it for years and it's eating me alive.
A few years ago, I hit someone with my car. And instead of calling for help, I pushed him over the side of the road and left him there. That's the truth. I've never said it out loud. I've never told anyone. But that's what I did. It was late, not 3 a.m. or anything, but late enough that the road was mostly empty. I was driving home from a friend's place. I had a couple of drinks earlier in the evening, but I'd stopped hours before. I told myself I was fine to drive. I probably was technically under the limit. I wasn't swerving all over the place or anything. I was tired, though. And I was distracted. I remember my phone lighting up, and I glanced at it for a second. That's all it took. There was a sudden impact, a heavy thud. I slammed the brakes, and my heart just dropped. I honestly thought I hit a deer at first. I got out of the car, and it wasn't a deer. It was a man. Lying behind my car, he was alive. I could see his chest moving. He was making these low sounds like he was trying to talk but couldn't get the words out. His leg was clearly messed up. There was blood. Not like in movies, but enough that you knew this was serious. I had my phone in my hand. I remember staring at it. I could have called 911 immediately. I should have. Instead, my brain went straight to panic mode. I started thinking about myself. I had been on my phone. I had been drinking earlier. What if he died anyway? What if I went to prison? What if my life was over? I hate that those were my first thoughts. There's a steep drop off the side of that road. Not a straight cliff, but a sharp wooded slope. No guardrail. I looked at him. I looked at the slope. I looked back at him. He tried to say something. I'm pretty sure he was trying to say help. And I made the worst decision of my life. I convinced myself he might not survive anyway. I convinced myself that if it looked like he fell or jumped, maybe it wouldn't come back to me. I told myself I was panicking and not thinking clearly. But the truth is, I did think. I just chose myself. I dragged him toward the edge. He was conscious enough to make sounds, but not to fight back. That part makes me sick. And I pushed him. There wasn't some dramatic scream. He just disappeared down into the dark. I stood there for a few seconds, and then I got back in my car and drove home. I washed the car the next day. There was damage on the front. I told people I hit a deer. That's what I told the mechanic, too. A couple days later, it was on the news. A man had been found at the bottom of that embankment. They said it looked like an accident or possibly suicide. There weren't signs of another vehicle being involved. They showed his picture. He had a wife and kids. I remember feeling like I was going to pass out when I saw that. Up until then, it was almost like my brain was protecting me from the reality. Seeing his face made it real. They interviewed his wife. She said they didn't understand why he would do this, that he had been stressed but not suicidal, that they were looking for answers. I turned the TV off because I couldn't handle it. I don't know if he would have survived if I had called for help immediately. Maybe the injuries were too severe. Maybe he would have died anyway. But he was alive when I left him. I took away any chance he had. That's the part that destroys me. It's been years, and his family still posts about him. I've looked them up more times than I should admit. His kids are growing up without him. His wife still writes about missing him. They think he fell or jumped. They don't know that someone hit him and then made sure he went over the edge. I think about going to the police all the time, walking in and telling them everything. I imagine what that would do to my parents, my siblings, the shame, the prison time, losing my job, my whole life blowing up, and then I think about his family. Do they deserve to know? Would it give them closure? Or would it just rip open a wound that's scarred over? I don't even know if I'm staying silent for them or for me. If I'm honest, it's probably for me. I've tried to rationalize it. I panicked. I wasn't thinking clearly. It was an accident to begin with. But what happened after wasn't just an accident. It was a choice. I chose to avoid consequences instead of helping a dying man. I don't sleep well. I have nightmares where I'm the one on the ground and someone decides I'm not worth the trouble. I avoid that road completely. Even hearing about hit and runs makes my stomach turn. I know I'm a coward. If I was a better person, I would have come forward years ago. Instead, I've been living a normal life while his family grieves. I don't expect sympathy. I don't deserve it. I just needed to finally say what I did somewhere. I killed someone because I was afraid. And I don't know how to live with that anymore.